And welcome back to the BigCheese AI podcast. My name is DeAndre Herakas, one of the world's top moderators, joined by Sean Hise, Brandon Corbin, and Jacob Wise. We are the usual suspects here at the BigCheese podcast. Today, guys, the future is fake. In this episode, we're diving into the captivating world of deepfakes, from harmless fun to potential fears and what the world holds. We're unpacking how AI is reshaping reality as we know it. And there's been a bunch of things that have popped up that some people like, other people probably don't. Some people really like it. The top search thing on Twitter. Brandon, what's going on?
Yeah, well, so first of all, let's start off with the fact that our show notes are now fake. Right?
Actually.
So these notes that we're looking at here are now fully generated through a thing that I've built that we can go in, you can basically run it, and you can be like, hey, what's the topic? Be like, I don't know. And it's going to pick our next topic for the show notes, right, or for the podcast.
Yes.
It's then going to be like, do you have a guest? And you're like, yes or no, and you give some information. And then it's actually going to automatically search all of the weekly headlines for anything that the topic's about, pulls it all in, and then I just drop that into Google Sheets. So now all of our notes are going to be
So
fake
as a test
as well.
this week, we are literally doing a fake podcast.
Yes.
Yeah,
This is a fake podcast.
So really what's happening is over the course of doing the BigCheese AI podcast, we've been trying to leverage as much AI as possible so that the only thing that we actually do is show up on
Sit down.
Thursdays and just talk.
Yep.
So now the show notes are created.
Yep.
All of our shorts and content is automatically created using AI. I mean, holy smokes.
Yeah, everything. The artwork, like
Yes.
so then the way that works is usually Monday, I'll get a copy of the video. We take that, we run that through our own process, and that generates the show notes. It generates the hero image. It generates the album artwork. So almost all of this now is getting to a point where it's completely automated through AI, and that's cool.
And I guess the last part is now that we're recording this all through these brand new mics, if you guys have noticed.
Look how fancy they are.
The podcast is completely edited using AI as well.
Yeah.
So all we do is just upload it.
Yes.
I mean, that sounds like a
That's gonna
project
be
in
very
itself,
cool.
But,
Yeah, so starting off with our headlines is and I'm going to butcher her last name, you guys, but Bobby Altroff or Althoff.
That's it.
Right, so she is a blog or a podcaster that kind of just blew up out of nowhere so fast that she blew up that people say she's kind of an industry plant. But she has this very unique style where she's completely deadpan, and it's just like, so tell me about what you're doing, Drake. You know, she just said, and there's just no emotion or whatever. Really funny. But and if you watch a video that she put out on, I think I saw it on TikTok, where she's like, I got up one morning and I was trending on Twitter or X, and she goes and looks, and it is a video of what appears to be her doing an act, and it just is all over Twitter. I mean, it has just been amplified 1,000 times over. And she's like, it's completely fake. But that's kind of where we're at now. You can watch this video, not that I did, of course, and
Yeah, right.
You had to make sure it was real.
You had to, right? But it's very hard to tell that is a fake. And this is just where we're at now. And so anybody, podcasters who put themselves on screen, who have their voice captured, who have their likeness captured over and over and over again, you have become fodder for being able to build deep fakes.
Right.
Joe Rogan,
You're training a model.
Exactly.
I heard like now they just like 3 seconds of audio is almost enough to get a pretty good.
And that's where we're gonna get.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I've wondered about when I get robocalls now.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if they were just waiting for me to talk so they can get my voice as a piece of my data.
Yeah, that's why I just don't answer the phone anymore.
Do not answer.
Yeah.
Even when you're like, hey, I used to be like, hey, this is Brandon, right? And now I'm like, every time I get one of these, I'm like, oh, you're probably recording my voice. You're probably being like, hey, this is Brandon.
Yeah.
And now you can train a model to make it sound exactly like me.
And then they can call all your grandparents and say,
say,
Johnny needs $50.
Yeah, Johnny's trapped in a prison in Mexico, and he needs $50,000 sent to this address for him to get out. And grandma and grandpa are gonna be like, oh my God, send that money.
Seriously. I mean, it is pretty concerning. Like, obviously, we're joking a little bit about Bobby, but Bobby's this person that whether she was an industry plant or whatever, she blew up. And she created a successful career for herself, and then all of a sudden these images pop up. Last week it was Taylor Swift.
Right.
A few months ago it was Drake coming out with a better song than Drake's came out with in the past couple of years. Right. Everyone was
that was cool.
That was really cool. But like you run into a serious problem where, what does that look like in the future, in your guys' opinion? Of okay, most things, even if like the person, we know that it's a fake. But it's still good.
It doesn't matter.
Will it even matter?
It does. Right. I don't. So they went, and in 9 hours, her clip had more than 4.5 million views. 9 hours, 4.5 million views. People don't care, right? Like again, it's all a fantasy anyway. Especially when we delve into the world of sexuality. Again, we all know porn is a fantasy. And so now all of a sudden these deep fakes are coming out with these people who we have, we might fancy anyway. And it's like, do you care? Again, like when I did my little experiment with having role-playing chats with Olama for last week's podcast, I don't care. I don't care that it's fake. My brain is reading this and is going haywire, thinking that this is a thing and this is real enough that I can get satiated. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think it really matters if it's fake or not. Like our brains see it and are like, like we just become the animals that we are.
Yeah.
And so there's actually not legal. There's not a lot of legal implications to what's going on, and so you're seeing there's this thing that's coming out called it's actually called the No
AI Fraud
It's
Act.
like it's called the No Artificial Intelligence Fake Replicas and Unauthorized Duplications Act, and I don't know why they need new laws for this, because it seems like it would be obviously. Some of this should be.
You could you'd think copyright might fall into play there, or like likeness.
And that's where you get. Is this just Is this your typical, just dog and pony show in Washington to try to make it seem like you're doing something,
right?
Or is there literally a legal gap that needs to get fulfilled? And I think that you talk about. I honestly equate some of this stuff that we talk about to like. When you went from like a Napster model to like a Spotify model,
that's a good
right.
Yeah.
Where you're how do I pay royalties to an artist?
Yeah.
That's music is being streamed one to many times, and the customer's paying a fixed fee subscription.
Right.
Well, when it comes to like deep fakes and all that, it's like or someone's deep faking you and you profit off of it, right? Or they profit off of your. It doesn't always have to be they deep faked you and it was bad. They put you in something that you wish that would take down. I'm guessing the Tom Cruise stuff actually helped him from a PR perspective, or the Drake song. Like he should have got paid royalties for that song.
Absolutely.
That was created from his and so anyways,
from his likeness.
There's obviously like legal. There's a legal implication to all this, but I think the other thing that's happening is that because so much fake imagery and videos being created, and law enforcement's having a really hard time with this because they're sifting through more media that's ever been created, and like someone could just throw a bunch of fake stuff at you and like blank, like there is like. There are desks already this high with paperwork, right? And now it's just getting tripled because of the amount of media that's coming in that's not real.
Yeah, it's not only that, but you also have no precedent. You weren't able to create a fake Drake song with Drake before.
No.
And now you can. You weren't able to make literally an entire...
So you have Weird Al. Let's use Weird Al.
I would agree with that.
as an argument.
Yeah.
So he would go, but again, it wasn't in... It was kind of in their likeness, but it was still his likeness. So maybe it doesn't.
But he went through a process, right?
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Went through and got approval and would talk to him and be like when he did Fat, the bad Michael Jackson's Bad thing, where he'd talk with Michael about it very specifically. So, I think that's probably the difference there, is that they're getting approval and being like, let's go ahead and do this, where these other people are just like, all of a sudden they wake up one day and they're like, that's not mine.
Yeah, they're gonna have to put some of the pressure on the platforms themselves, because how can you possibly track down if I can? So listening to someone the other day on YouTube, they were like, "Oh, I can make a deep fake in half an hour and it'll be good enough." Blah 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 blah. It takes me basically no effort. I'm like, okay, so that means anyone can basically do that. And if anyone can do it, they will do it.
Yep.
And then if they do it, like, you're going to get cases like that where it becomes either more escalated, more serious. And how could you prosecute someone at an individual level? You can't.
Right. Well, I mean, you could even argue that since that's the case now, like when Trump blamed a deep fake on the fat shit, like, but now it's a cop out.
Yeah.
Now instead of it being like, oh, that wasn't me, that's a deep fake. Could you prove it?
Oh my gosh, you could say anything. Yeah.
Anything's a deep
and
fake
that's
now.
where it's going to go. Now, in all fairness to Trump, somebody did take a photo, and it was of the golfer. I don't know if you know his name. It's the guy with the big white beard.
Oh, John Daly.
Yeah. So it was him, and they just pretty much took his face off and put Trump's face on in Photoshop. And so Trump was like, "Well, it's a deep fake." You
Like
know?
the
Yeah,
movie
that's the
Face
pot calling
Off.
the kettle black.
Yeah.
The amount of fake depictions of their enemies that his tribe
Oh,
does
yeah.
is
Oh,
unbelievable.
yeah.
But going back to what Jacob said, ultimately, I think this comes down to the media distributors, because most of not many people have the ability to distribute media to 4.5 million people in 9 hours.
Right.
X does, YouTube
Yep.
does. These platforms.
But it never would have happened on YouTube.
Right.
It would have maybe started.
Right, because
and
they
maybe-
already have some stuff like this in place.
Exactly.
So, but going back to that, you look at trusted media platforms, and we talked about this before the podcast. There's a concept that's going to have to get put in place to verify media.
Yeah.
And we talked about people putting an SSL certificate on their website to verify that. Right, that this is coming from a certificate authority. We verified this domain. Blah blah blah. Blah. It's encrypted. If you upload media to a widely distributed streaming service, there is going to need to be a verification process so that media is forever tied to the publisher.
Yeah.
Right. And then the other thing that's going to happen is they're going to have to do more scrubbing on that and more AI on that, to basically say, is this depicting someone? Do you have authorization to depict this person?
Right.
What are the reasons and the use cases? And it might even have to get, I mean, obviously, they're saying you might not even be able to discern deepfakes from real in the future.
Right.
So it might not be possible. It's never going to be perfect.
Right.
But I think you can probably stop a video like that from being distributed to 4.5 million viewers in 9 hours.
Yeah.
I think that is 100% the right answer, if there wasn't like some counter influence in the fact that the only reason that Twitter survived a few years ago, before all this happened with Elon, was because they allowed porn on the platform. Right? And so they're incentivized to have something like this. If something goes viral like that on Twitter, it pulls people back to the actual app.
And I think that's
mean,
where you
I think that's a
go,
conversation
like
worth
EU
having, right?
regulator style, right? Like Google has a monopoly on search, and the EU puts a kibosh to it, right? I think that I don't think that the legislation that's getting proposed would do anything for like an individual lawsuit perspective. It would it would be able to be implemented at a large scale, like against a X or against a YouTube.
We're going to see it, and I think it probably does come from the EU, right? They're just like the EU is forcing Apple to make our PC or whatever the new chat format is. It's kind of like iMessages, but for everybody else.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to force them to do it, and they're going to have to adjust, and they're going to have to make it. But the fact of the matter is that Twitter very specifically is just like, let it ride. Let's see what happens.
And Musk got some heat for that.
Oh, and he probably should.
He definitely should. There's things on that platform that are just the fact that there's businesses on that platform that promote whatever they might promote, and if you go onto that platform and you search some wild stuff, you will find extremely uncomfortable things on Twitter.
I've never tried such a thing.
Dude,
but
X is turning into absolute ground zero.
Really?
There's no
It
question.
truthfully is.
I mean,
Yeah.
anytime you go now, like I've said before, when I go to Truth Social, right? Like I have to emotionally prepare. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to war with a bunch of these MAGA folk, and I do it. But never. That was the only platform that ever really triggered that within me. Now, when I go to X, I find the same thing happen. But with X, obviously, I'm Brandon Corbin on X. By the way, you can follow me. And it's like, oh, I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to. I'm going to say it. You know, I'm going to call you out on this bullshit because I don't agree with it. But it's the exact same feeling that I get now when I go to Twitter versus when I go to Truth Social. I mean, I did get a like from Elon. I shared that in the Slack channel, didn't I?
What?
I forgot what I said to him, but he said something, and I like made some snarky reply to it, and he liked it. And then I'm like, and then I'm like, well, hey, while I've got your attention, can we talk about you open sourcing Grok, because that's why you left OpenAI, because they weren't open sourcing it. And then I never heard anything back.
Yeah, he's a mysterious figure.
He is. He is a. I can't figure it out.
I honestly think that if I look at it from a psychology lens, he seems like a guy who worked really hard, was really smart, and accomplished a lot of things, and then kind of was like, you know what? I just want to do whatever I want to do now, and I don't care what anyone thinks anymore.
He's got the fuck you money, so he can literally just be like, I don't care. Like, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want to do. And I respect that, right? And he's like, you know what? We're going to fire 75% of the Twitter employees, and we're going to improve a bunch of stuff, and they've added a lot of features, so I'll give him props for that. But it kind of seems like what happened with Joe Rogan, because again, I followed Rogan like at episode 50 all the way up to like 1,000 or whatever it was. But then all of a sudden, when everything started getting hyper political, and then all of a sudden it was like everything just starts kind of getting this weird like.
It's a thing where everying that you say has a political implication.
And it was just like
talking about stuff. Yeah,
and again, I've got a lot of right-wing ideas. I've got a lot of left-leaning ideas that I like. And so I don't mind it, but when everything that we're talking about, every time now Elon's posting something, it's something about the fucking southern border and how we're being, inundated with all of these migrants and that they're going to basically destroy the world. And it's just like, okay, maybe, but like,
well, I think you expect a little bit more from, the CEO of SpaceX, X, and you in Tesla, you think about things, and you don't want them to just come off like your crazy uncle on Facebook.
No, exactly. So, like again, we want to put people
and
on.
I think honestly that just goes to show you the impact that social media has on our brains.
Yes.
And the impact that media consumption has on everyone. Because you look at a guy like Dan Dockich. Like Dan Dockich was a good commentator. I don't know if you know who Dan Dockich is. Mm-hmm. Dan Dockich is a guy who was the interim head coach at IU. He was the guy that shut down Michael Jordan in 1984 in the NCAA tournament, right? He was this like IU legend. He was assistant coach for Bob Knight for a long time, and he got his own radio show, and he got on Twitter, and he just like started becoming such a narcissist and is obsessed with his own likes that it fundamentally changed him and how he acted, and it just really ripped his brain apart. He ended up losing his job, going to Outkick, and now he's just some asshat on Twitter. And he's lost so much because of it, and he just won't be quiet. And it's like, you were a respected member of the media. You were sitting on the table at ESPN, and now you're nothing.
Right.
Right. And I think that for everyone, I mean, Elon's got the FU money, but for everyone, just take a step back with some of this stuff. Yep. Like you're the dopamine that you're receiving from all this is not good for you or your mental health.
Right.
And for the media that you're consuming, just take it with a grain of salt.
Exactly.
Like you just chill out. And I think that, it's just poison.
Yeah, we mentioned, a second ago about Twitter, and you could search things. The reason that I think it falls in line with your point there, like in the world of deepfakes and all these things that are coming out, and the fact that Elon, one of the most successful, philanthropic, brilliant minds of our time, is obsessed with Twitter.
All right.
And he's just constantly consuming media, and he's already done everything he's done so well, but like a guy like that, at that stature, can get pulled into it. And really what we're saying is, like, as you move into the world, and like you're listening to this podcast because you want to learn more about like things in AI, the biggest updates and things like that, like I guess the suggestion from my perspective, and I would love your guys as well, is take things with a grain of salt, but just be careful on social media, on content platforms. Like if we can make an entire podcast, probably by the end of this year, operate without us even being on it, then you should like expect that there's going to be content you're interacting with coming soon on a daily basis that may or may not be like real whatsoever, but also it's going to impact you regardless of whether or not you know it's real or not.
Yeah, I saw a video the other day where this dude made thing where people with the U.S. is being invaded by aliens, and his mom was like a big alien believer, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, I knew it." She's like calling her uncle, and like for one, that was like a little bit of a cruel prank, but still hilarious. But like so things like that, it's like we are susceptible to bias, like whatever we already kind of believe, and that's a good example, I think. And like another example I saw was that there might be like an announcement 12 hours before the election that the election date has moved or something. Not totally believable, but if you already have a bias of like not trusting the government or thinking things are unstable or whatever, that you are susceptible to that, So things like that, whereas like we have to be really careful, and that's hard to train. We do get better over time, but we're in this like training period right now of like, okay, we used to be really susceptible to Nigerian princes. Not so much anymore, right? Like now people get that email and they're like, not this time. But like we just will eventually become more educated. But.
So to that point, I'm sitting there on TikTok like a zombie, right? Just swiping through.
Get that next dopamine kick.
Exactly. And I see a video of the oh hell, what's the big castle in Disney?
Magic.
The Magic Kingdom. Yeah. It's Princess
Cinderella's
castle burnt down. Right now, I'm watching videos of people in Disney and the frigging castle's on fire, and there's smoke all over the place, and I'm like, holy shit! The castle has burnt down, and it took the fire department this long to get there, so they weren't able to save it, and all this. And I'm like, so I end up going upstairs later to my wife, and I'm like, did you hear about and she's like, no. She's like, you'd think that probably would be real news that happened. I'm like, So I end up going and looking. Sure enough, it was a quote unquote parody. It was a parody that someone released, then somebody else picked up on TikTok and ended up making a video about it. And I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. And it was all bullshit.
Wow.
I mean, that's where we're at. And both my son and my daughter think I'm an idiot because I fell for it. But I'm like, you just don't know. Like it was legit. I mean, literally, there's people walking, there's smoke, there's all of the things that you need to basically be convinced that this was a real story. And I fell for it.
Do you know what actually disturbs me as a parent more than anything that I've ever seen in my life? Is I'll be at like a kid's basketball game, and like there's somebody with a younger, like maybe their kid's pretty young, and their 2-year-old will take the phone from their parent, they'll go to YouTube and they'll go to Shorts and just start swiping through Shorts.
Yeah.
And your ass needs to get off TikTok.
Oh yeah, no question.
Because like I forget what the stat was, and somebody needs to look this up, but it was like something like 25% of Gen Z gets all their news from TikTok.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, wow, we have failed as a society at this point.
Maybe though, right? So as now I'm old and I'm an idiot and I'm going to fall for all this stuff, as I become a grandpa and like I'm getting played like a fiddle. But I'm hoping that my son, my daughter, they're starting to see it and they're going, oh, okay, and they're slowly building up this kind of, protection for the bullshit that's ultimately coming. And again, you're and we just realized this last week, that you're the same age as my daughter, so I could be your father, by the way. And
you've mentioned that time.
It's kind of strange, isn't it? But your generation, I think, is going to just have this. You're just going to have a fundamental disbelief of everything that you potentially see, where on the other side, the boomers, like the Gen Xers, like we're kind of in this weird middle ground. The boomers fell for everything, right? Like the princes of Africa would convince them all day long. And so I think I feel hopeful for your generation.
Isn't that what they call cap? That's cap.
Just to be honest, Sean's got Urban Dictionary.
my son says it.
Yeah.
No, that's totally right. It's cap.
Yeah.
They hate it when I use nomenclature. I want to know the terms. Like again, mid, it was a great invention. Whoever created mid, I'm like, that's a great. My son hates it when I use mid, but I'm like, it's a very practical thing. So I love the nomenclature that each of these new generations are creating.
I think that the younger kids, you're right. They evolve with the times. That they're extremely resilient. Yeah, I haven't really been through that as much when it comes to like social media because my kids aren't allowed to have phones. But
And they're
Good
how,
for you.
How old are they?
I would never get
but
my kids phones
they're
either.
it's not like that cool. They're in 5th and 4th grade and 5 years old, so they shouldn't have a phone.
Right.
But
When did you get your first phone?
I was in high school. I was a
I was
StarTAC.
15.
I got mine in
It was
8th
a
grade.
Motorola StarTAC. It was a cool phone.
Yeah. I had a little T-Mobile, little flip boy.
Dude,
Nice.
I had a flip phone too. You were the real deal if you had a flip phone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, see, I was there.
What year would that have been for you?
I don't know how old I was. I think I was in 8th grade when I got my first phone.
Okay.
Maybe 6th.
I think I was like 20.
There's products
20.
coming out now that, and this is I think going to be more common. Is there's manufacturers that are building phones for kids. And for youth, so
Right.
they're not like dumbed down iPhones, and then Apple will just copy off what they did and like release a version of their software that's just for kids or
Oh yeah,
even
they
a
got to get
phone.
them early.
But
It's-
there's a movement to get kids to basically be tracked and communicated with, but not like sitting on the App Store.
Yeah, I mean, because like there was an
won't
entire
do it.
generation where before that became a problem, there were the iPad kids, and you'd be in Applebee's or Chili's with your friends, and there'd be the parents eating their wings and things, and there's this kid with like this disgusting iPad that's just scrolling through it. He's been there for 30 minutes, and it has all the buffers on it and things like that. And I'm like, oh, there's the iPad kid.
Right.
And he's like, I'll never have an iPad.
I was
kid.
in.
But they really did.
I was
impact
in
me.
Puerto Rico for the holidays like 2 or 3 years ago, and there it is much more common to just give a kid a device.
Right.
I don't know why, but it just is.
Well, because it's easy. Again, give your kid, give him the device, and you don't need to worry about them.
Yeah,
and that's the problem.
They had. I feel so bad for even bringing this up. Sorry, or sorry, Diza. It has nothing to do with Puerto Ricans. But this family had brought their infant to the party in a stroller, and it was like probably like 6 to 8 weeks old, maybe a little bit longer. And they had a contraption on the stroller that was it was a clamp that was on the edge of the stroller, and it had one of those like malleable like stands on it,
Yeah.
and it just put the screen right in front of the kid's
Oh,
face.
no.
And they were just boom, screen, just already training it on cartoons.
Don't do it.
And this little 8-week-old kid was just staring at it.
Well, when you watch,
Well, that's us
It
too. We're
probably
just
hadn't
not 8
even
weeks
developed
old
its
anymore.
vision yet.
Right,
yeah.
but you have dogs. Like you can watch those dogs who watch the television, and they're like, there's very specific videos on YouTube for dogs and cats that you can put on, and they just watch it. They're just like, "Bah," I mean,
Transfixed.
that's where we are. And you just give it to your kids so they don't annoy you. You can have your dinner, and you can be at Disney World, and they're just sitting there, just consuming all of it. It's bad. It's bad.
it's bad.
It's gonna backfire.
Then I will say it's not everybody. I've seen people with kids that literally their kids are outside every second possible, doing everything, doing everything.
Playing
your
kick
normal
the
kid.
can.
And those kids are going to separate themselves a little bit, I think, because I think they get exposed to technology enough, anyways. But
Back in my day, my mom didn't know where I was at.
God, I sound like
Exactly.
an old person.
I was over at David's and we were smoking cigs.
Until you held the dinner bell or
Yeah.
the lights turn on, and that's
Yeah,
when you
mine
knew
was
it
the
was time to go
streetlights,
home.
yeah.
Did you see
Yeah.
that? There's a viral video the other day on Instagram, and it was back in the day when you needed a public service announcement, and it was the public service announcement was, "It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are?" And it's like your ass knows where your kids are.
No, yeah, actually, I had no idea where we were.
Let's talk about another piece of this though, which is the much more, I think, scarier piece, which is there's a big difference between creating a deep obviously it'd be mortifying if someone created a deep fake of me in a terrible light.
I'm totally gonna do that, by the way.
Right? Yeah. I mean, like I think something
make 'em
similar
hard.
has happened
He'll be like, "All right."
to some people that I even know. Like that has had like something like that has happened to people I know already.
Really?
Yes. But I think what's really more scary is what's really happening in the business world, which is people creating massive amounts of fake identities and fake information. And this is a huge growth. I have a client that's seeing it, right? And every single day it's getting different, is people are trying to create fake personas, fake profiles, fake information to get access to systems to do nefarious deeds.
So they're creating like completely fake personas.
Creating fake accounts, circumventing reCAPTCHA from Google, which if you don't know what reCAPTCHA is the like behind the scenes utility Google uses to identify if you're a robot or not. It avoids you having to explicitly click the motorcycles. Or it integrates where you have to click the motorcycles, which everyone.
If you're on a browser other than Chrome, you pretty much have to go through all their photo selection.
Yeah, it's terrible, right?
You're training their AI.
And like the little corner of the wheel is in the picture, and you're like, does that count?
Yeah.
Every single
Is that a signal?
Yeah.
Click, click, click.
Yeah.
Ugh,
They
yeah.
have fun ones where you like line it up.
Do you click the extra boxes or do you go for the minimal? I go for minimal.
I click for maximal because I'm like, I don't have time to
I don't
deal.
think they make it so you have to get them all right.
They might not. They probably don't.
It's kind of a mystery, to be honest. Like, it just, once you get through, like, okay, great.
I mean, again, you are training it. And in the moment that I realized it, that you're training their AI for their car vision, is when it was like, highlight all of the crosswalks. I'm like, well, hell, you're just training your model for your car driving things. And sure enough, that's
smart.
exactly what it is.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Select the motorcycles, select the bikes, select the signals. Like, it's all about auto
they're
driving.
using us.
That's totally using us
my God.
for basically
Wow,
training their
that's a huge
AI.
Brandon
models.
just dropped the
the news of the century.
news of the century.
Yeah, you're training their future driving models.
Wow.
Thanks, Elon.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's so. I think the implications of this is phishing is just getting harder and harder to figure out.
So OnlyFakes. Let's talk about that.
Yeah,
real
let's
quick.
talk about OnlyFakes.
OnlyFakes is was it on the dark web or was it anywhere?
Brandon,
So-
do you ever get on the dark web?
Oh yeah, I get on the dark
How
web.
do you
all
get
the time.
on the dark web?
Yeah, that's the question.
Brave. So if you use the
Brave,
Brave browser,
yeah.
you can just launch into. You can launch a Tor. So you've got private browsing, which basically just means I'm not going to record your history. So when you're doing some nefarious stuff, but again, I'm not protecting you from like your ISP. They can see what sites you're going to. But when you launch into the Tor mode, you're now using the Onion router and you're getting rerouted through a bunch of different things. Most likely all government run, by the way. So. But yeah, so then you can get to any of the sites that are purely on the dark web just using Brave. So Brave browser. If you don't use Brave, it's great. It's a killer platform. It's very much like Chrome with all the Google removed, and it's got just some really good features of like privacy blocking and tracker blocking and all that. So I've been a Brave user for quite a while.
Yeah. So a little known fact is, and I always say his name wrong, but Brandon Eich is the founder of Brave.
Yeah.
That's the guy who invented JavaScript.
Oh no shit.
Yep, he did, and he invented it in 2 weeks at Yahoo.
Yeah, that's right.
He scrapped together the programming language
Yahoo.
in a couple weeks.
Well, I thought it was.
That's why JavaScript. So JavaScript is the programming language of the browser. It's also one of the hardest languages to get to understand because it's literally like the wild, wild west of programming.
Right.
But this dude, he is a G. I love him. He wrote a book called "If You're a Programmer and You're Out There and You're Trying to Figure Out, You're Trying to Get a Good Foundational Understanding of JavaScript, which is the programming language of the browser. Read JavaScript, the good parts."
Did you read it?
Oh yes, that's how I got good.
Really?
Yeah, I literally was like stumped, and I was like, I just read that book like twice, and I was like, okay, I understand this stuff.
Who was it? Coughlin? That I'm thinking. It was the guy who was talking about. I thought he was one of the.
Douglas. No, Crockford wrote that book.
Crockford. Okay.
Okay, sorry, I'm mistaking the
Yes.
two.
All right. All right.
Ike is, who is Ike?
But he was the guy who was like, we're talking about how we named JSON, and he's like, we called it Jason, but it might be Jason.
I'm
We
sorry.
were thinking it was going to be
I'm mistaking the
Gizmo.
two.
Jizzle.
Ike is the guy. He was the CEO of Mozilla,
Oh, okay. And
but he's also something else.
But
too.
but Mozilla wasn't that the company where whatever that guy's name is was actually doing the JavaScript development.
Yeah, now I'm totally confused.
But nevertheless, right? Like
He's one of the original G's of the internet.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Over here. Sorry.
We got the cheese.
Sorry, Brandon.
No, he did create JavaScript.
Fucking hell. Jacob, what are you doing?
All right, here's the facts. Ike created JavaScript.
Okay.
Crockford wrote the book JavaScript, the good parts.
Okay. All right. There we
But
go.
learning from both of those guys is
Absolutely,
solid.
yeah.
Because they're like the founders of this stuff. And I think if you go back to the fundamentals and understand like how this stuff got created, it's the weirdest stuff. It makes you feel better about being terrible at it. Because like all this stuff that happened, you're like, they just scrapped this stuff together when they were building Netscape.
Yeah.
And they were building these browsers and they didn't really have a standard. And so after all these years, they finally got together and created some standards. But there's a reason why it's really, really hard. It was always really, really hard to be a good web developer.
Yeah. So it sucked. Back in the day, man, I mean, you had to deal with IE 4 and 5. Both of them were just horrible. And then you had some people that were using Mozilla back then or Netscape. It might have been Navigator back then. And it was brutal to be able to design things and that's why jQuery came out, because it made it so we had like a single interface for all of the different ways that each of the browsers worked. jQuery just came out with a new version, by the way. Did you guys hear about this? Mm-mm. Yeah, jQuery has a new version, like 15 or 20,000. I don't know what the hell it is.
It still comes on in all the major frameworks.
It's crazy. Yeah, so it's still there and people are still using it. I'm like, man, I almost just for fun want to kind of go back and try to build something with jQuery.
I still go back and look at like Lightbox.
Oh, yeah.
Like V1.0 is like the
Right?
first JavaScript library
Dude,
ever
it was
used. It's
crazy.
Like, you can click on an image and it'll open up in a large pop-up of that image.
It was
It's
great.
called a Lightbox. It's like, holy shit.
Dude, it was nuts. Like, people don't know, if you haven't been a developer like in the early 2000s, you just don't know how bad it was. Like, again, we were literally writing code, hitting save, and it was automatically getting uploaded to the server through FTP.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like, that was, and this is like huge ass companies who've raised millions and millions of dollars, and we're sitting there just writing
That was
stuff.
because of the Dreamweaver auto upload feature.
Exactly.
You press save and it auto uploads.
And it would just auto upload it to your FTP server. We're doing this shit live, kind of thing. I mean, it was nuts. It was a great time, but man, it was absolutely crazy.
Do you remember the website CSS Zen Garden?
Oh my God, I use that
you?
all the
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
and I'm like, guys. So funny enough, let me tell you a little story about CSS Zen Garden. I ended up working for this company that was in e-commerce fulfillment, and he was like the director of technology, but he liked to call himself the CTO. And he's like, well, I'm kind of like the CTO. I'm like, man, not really, because you're the director of technology, but whatever. So he and I got in this whole battle, and it was all about how their website used and I'm like, listen, guys, here's an example of CSS. Oh, wow. Like, we can make a single CSS that can completely transform the website. I don't need any of your .NET bullshit. I can just take your garbage HTML and I can style it. So I use CSS Zen Garden for all the executives to be like, hey, listen, same exact code, different CSS, totally different experience. And it completely shut that guy down. We got into a screaming match. I ended up saying some bad words to him. He's like, you stop cussing at me. And the whole thing broke down, and I ended up winning the debate. And my whole system ended up going through, and his did not. And he ended up getting laid off later on.
CSS is literally the way that I made it in this world. I went in college and everyone was like really like learning different web programming stuff and I was obsessed with the fact that you could change the color.
Yeah.
And I was like this, I could create a box. And so I went and learned CSS, and that's what differentiated me. It was the ability to translate a design into production with CSS.
Yep, 100%.
So CSS is, while JavaScript is the programming language of the web, CSS is the styling framework.
Got it.
Yeah.
And that's why Craft is able to fulfill on the best designs ever.
Yeah, that's why when people go, Jacob, what'd they say about us?
Oh yeah, just no one's ever been able to take a design and build it and make it look the same like you guys do. I'm like, yeah, that's what we do.
It's literally what we've been doing.
Yeah.
Get to notice it.
Yeah. I love to hear it, but yeah, it's what we do.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about this. Like, what is the, I guess, biggest risk in your mind to like deepfake technology? Is it the ability to just ruin someone, like to like make them feel emasculated, or completely exposed, or is it to hack? I mean, to me, the hacking thing is like way easier than it's ever been. I mean, you can fake identities. You can go to this website and you can get a brand new driver's license in California in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That looks perfect. Yeah. Like what is the biggest?
What was it? Only Fakes, which is for $15, you can go and get a full online or a full like identity, basically. And they're using large language models to basically generate fake identities. I mean, so that's problematic.
It's like you used to have to go to your random buddy that still sold weed to get a bag, right? And now you can just go to the store.
Exactly.
Well, you used to like getting a fake identity. Like how many movies have you seen where they go to like the guy and he's like, "Hey, guy, I spent all weekend, we're getting the plastic right and doing all this stuff." And now it's like, dude, it's nothing.
Yeah. No, I don't know where it leads, but it feels bad. Like it feels like we're in a position where a lot of this stuff can just lead to all sorts of nefarious stuff, and we can't even necessarily imagine how bad it can ultimately get to.
So if I was a consumer or a business person right now, a couple things. I would definitely start utilizing a centralized identity service for everything you do. So like Stripe has integrated with the Apple's new Apple actually finally came out with an authenticator natively to their services. Have you seen that?
No.
Have you used it? But like has anyone ever used the Authenticator app?
Oh yeah,
like it does that random number thing, and then you're always like, wait, I don't even know how to get into that app or whatever.
Yeah.
Apple has that integrated now. So as a two-factor authentication, instead of sending you a text, it's using your thumbprint, and it's using like.
Is this the pass key kind of thing?
It's the pass key
yeah,
thing.
Right.
Is that an iOS 17 thing?
Right,
yeah, I actually, that's funny that you mentioned that. I just used that the other day, and I didn't realize that's what that was.
It's a new form of biometric-based authentication for your identity for services, but it also works with like Stripe is always the shining example, right? They're the number one payments processor. They're great, but like they've integrated into their core sign-in services. So you have to be that person to sign into the service, and then to me that's gonna the safeguard, because you are going to, because so many people are now, there's basically a whole new capability that's been created. So you're going to see people just get their identities just absolutely flushed.
Yeah.
And the rise in identity theft is going to increase. And it's gonna, what they're gonna do is try to figure out a way to spoof you to get your information, log into your accounts.
Yep.
And so use accounts that have these sort of advanced security mechanisms. If you're building products, you need to do that stuff.
Right.
Like you need to implement more security now.
Yeah.
If you're not verifying emails or something, or if you're not, they're going after low-hanging fruit first.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And the reason part of it, there's been these types of attacks have existed for a long time, but with AI now, people can supercharge these attacks to cast a much wider net.
Yep.
And do way more and tap into these systems. So yeah, it's going to be a exposure point or a attack vector.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm seeing too is that the
like
concept of the headless browser is being used for hacking like crazy.
Oh
Yeah.
So they're going out and they're spinning up scripts that just pretend they actually go and use the application.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're figuring out ways to circumvent these services. So, I mean, there's a reason why everything that you have is trying to implement two-factor auth now, because all the ones that don't are getting absolutely owned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Wasn't Google redoing their auth?
it looks like it.
I haven't read into that.
It
at
was
all.
bad. It was a horrible design. The new login flow.
Yeah.
But
Oh, really?
yeah, it was.
But they keep saying it's coming and it's not here.
Well, so I've definitely seen the new.
I saw a new authentication.
Yeah, the new
when I
log,
logged in
and
today.
it might just be the design that's changed on the login flow, and not necessarily like the underlying pinning of it. But you can definitely see that they're making some adjustments to it. And I'm seeing weird things like where it's not maintaining a login status for me on one of my accounts, and where like I'm constantly having to log in and stuff. So it definitely seems like they're kind of making some adjustments. Adjustments there.
Back to your question of like, what do we think deepfakes, like the biggest implication is? I think it's around misinformation because we're primed and ready for it. Like everybody is biased. Everyone has their biases.
Yep.
We can distribute. We have distribution, So there's all these platforms that people can consume it, and now it's becoming very easy to create and produce the output. So it's only a matter of time before China, Russia, or just some asshole in Montana. Sorry, Montana. I don't know why I'm picking on you, but like someone's going to create some things and it's going to get out there. And, they get shut down, but it's just tipping the scale. You know, it's like, is one thing going to destroy us? Probably not. But they're tipping the scales.
Yeah, when a nation state is behind it and has all the compute power that they've got.
How are these, and maybe this is a question for another day, but ransomware. Ransomware is traditionally implemented through Microsoft's centralized
You're making sure we never get advertised by Microsoft.
No,
Thank you very much.
I mean, pretty much, right? Like everyone that I ever know that's gotten ransomware, it's been done on their LDAP system. Like they literally, they lock everybody out and the administrator login gets locked out.
Yeah.
And then they control your security of your domain and then you're fucked, right? Like if that to me is like, it seems like it's another win for Apple. It seems like it's another, right? It's another win for Apple. Because I feel like Apple is the most connected to our true identities right now. They've got your face, they've got your thumbprint, they've got everything, right? Yeah. And they're implementing like I don't think my iCloud account could get ransomware.
Well,
you know what I mean?
I do, but a lot of the deep fake stuff that kind of comes out seems to be originated through an iCloud account. I'm trying. I can't remember. It was the.
Well, they might be making
I do Tribute. What's that movie? Tribute.
Oh, Hunger Games.
Hunger Games. Yeah. Who's the main actress?
Katniss Everdeen.
No,
it's.
Bleh. You know Jennifer
Lawrence, right?
Yeah.
So Jennifer Lawrence.
Starts with a Jennifer.
She started the fappening, right?
They got
Reddit.
into her iCloud
They got
account.
into her iCloud account.
But
and
that was
released
before they put in all that stuff.
That's okay, but nevertheless, that
is true.
You know,
Kim
that was
Kardashian had the same thing.
Exactly.
I
think. So,
but also, when you look at the enterprise level, the reason that Microsoft gets hacked more, in my opinion, or probably fact, I'm probably right, is
Am I right? Or am I right? I'm right.
It's because most people use Microsoft. So like there's an inherently
I think there's
just a volume.
I think it's like AWS IPs, right?
Yeah.
Like we see, like people going to. But I think that my point with that is everything's so centralized.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if you get
That's
the
true.
administrator password to a Microsoft. So I guess my point is if you completely two-factor auth with biometric. So the fact is authentication. Who's something you know, something you are, and something you have.
Yeah.
Right? So if you do thumbprint with a phone, that's 3 factors.
Yeah.
Right? That's a 3-factor auth. That's not 2-factor auth. And so I think that you can protect yourself from getting your ass hacked by utilizing services that utilize 3-factor authentication.
But then you have the organizations, right? You have these enterprises where you've got
they have your data.
Yeah, and Janie's over here. She's just working the front desk, and all of a sudden she gets an email from her boss that's like, and it could be a video, and it could be like, or an audio, and it'd be like, "Hey, Janie, I need you to transfer $1,000 from our one account to this account. Would you do that, please?" She's like, "Oh yeah, no problem."
Oh, there's been so I think and if you look at an organization perspective, CFOs are the #1 target for this stuff.
Sure,
because they are the ones with the keys to the bank account. You see it all the time, and I'm not going to talk about who it was, but like literally CFOs have just wired $50,000 for no reason.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that is very problematic.
It's extremely problematic.
And so like this new synthetic media is going to be something that companies and enterprises are going to have to start treating almost like malware, right? Right now we have firewalls that are pretty much sitting there watching for some file to come through. We do a quick hash on the file. We'll be like, hey, that's a malware that was already identified by our security team. So to make sure it blocks it, we're going to do the same thing with the synthetic media, which is like, this is a completely fake bullshit audio file that just was shared with Janet, and it's all fake. And we're going to have this like new spectrum of malware that's all based on synthetic media.
So to end on a positive note, I think there's every single time there's a significant change, it creates economic opportunities. It just so happens that as what we learned today, one of the huge economic opportunities that exists is in cybersecurity.
Yes, 100%.
And cybersecurity is something that some people put to the back burner in the last 5-6 years, especially when you got all this VC money pumping into SaaS companies and doing all this stuff. And now you're looking at more established companies, companies that are scale-ups that already have customers. The new players, are less and fewer far between, right? But the concept of, if I was looking at a kid that was going into college and was in IT right now, I'd have them learn the AI pieces, but really get really smart about security, because protecting assets is going to be a
Insanely
very
valuable.
in-demand skill over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And like the platforms that enable secure development of the applications will win, because like, as we know, like the more at bats you have, the more iterations you do on your product, the better it will be. And these people are going to be afraid to do that because change could implement, security risks. So like those people who do implement these like high level, if it's an auth provider or whatever is it a service like AWS that's actually hosting the thing, like whoever is the winner of those security platforms is going to make a lot of money.
So again, I've got to give props to my son. So I let him access my ChatGPT, right? Like he uses my ChatGPT account for all of his homework. And so I go in and every once in a while I'll go and I'll like sneak in on what he's doing. And dude, I have complete hope in the future of this next generation, because he's like, okay, here's the rules, here's how it's going to work. Do you understand my instructions? And ChatGPT's like, yep, I understand. He's like, all right, next I want you to do blah 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 blah. And he's completely cheating, but he's working ChatGPT like I've never even imagined. Right, and I'm learning things from him as he's telling. No, he's like, nope. Listen, I need you to do this and this and this. It's masterful.
That's definitely how I am very hard on ChatGPT.
Yeah. Yes.
I treat it like my little stepsister.
So you can just smack around.
Like, no, just write the code. I understand what I'm asking.
Dude,
don't tell me
it's
what I
great.
asked you for the first 12 seconds of this conversation.
Yeah.
I asked it to do something the other day and forgot to specify what language, and it started giving me Python. It was like, if you want to use Python, do this. I'm like, no, stop. Just give me the JavaScript. That's all I want.
Yeah.
But if they would have used BigCheese.ai when it was a viable product, it would have remembered what programming language you like.
That's right. We had the memory.
And with that, everybody, this is the Big Cheese AI podcast. Thanks so much for listening to the end of this one. Catch you guys next week.